We will speaking of exports on how we can increase our exports right now. Our country has an important increase in the field of exports. So together for this panel, we have with us Mr. Gerasimos, who is the Managing Director of Atradius Greece, Mr. Dimitris Karavasilis, who is the CEO at DK Marketing and IT Markets with the International Trade Advisor in the American-Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Retsas from Enterprise Greece. Welcome. We have half an hour at our disposal. We must be very brief in our replies. So let us start with Mr. Tzeis with a question on how credit security helped the exporter and the wedge of foreign markets, especially in such an insecurity that we currently witness. Thank you, Elias, for the question. Good afternoon to all the friends. The American-Hellenic community. Let me start by stating that the exports is a decisive factor so as to be led successfully to the growth of Greek economy. We have excellent, ingenious Greek exporters who have survived the metal, so forth, the mentality not only to do well, but actually to do excellent well abroad. That's why I'm convinced that we will win this pledge. But a very complex and useful tool they have is credit insurance. For those of you who do not yet know what that means, let me say a couple of words. This is an insurance that protects the exporter in the case the debtor abroad to whom he has sent commodities and services in credit does not pay. That is, if the debtor does not pay, then the insurance company will foot the bill. This insurance is offered through credit limits asked by the exporter for each and every debtor / client. And then the insurer asks Atradius, in order to do the risk, we make a risk assessment of the solvency of the debtor. In order to do that, we cross-check the financial data. Atradius is a global force. We have 100 years of history. In Greece, we are the market leaders in the last years. So we have developed a huge database for 200 million companies, where we update their financial data on a frequent and periodic basis so as to have the best and most accurate picture for those companies on how they are, on their financial health. So we can tell on time and in a clever way to the exporter to whom to export and approve the credit limits. Any country without running any additional risk. When we approve a credit limit for the debtor abroad, our job is not done. It is there that our job starts, because this client enters a database that I mentioned beforehand, which is continuously and constantly of trade risk. Then we inform on time the exporter to avoid further exports, further exposure. This is most important and prevents disaster. But of course, we don't know everything, and such case, the exporter enjoys this from the original claim if the debtor claim for his account the exposure and have them cashed in with our own resources all over the world, either through judicial recourse. How can he find a lawyer to represent him? So we assume all that procedure, regardless of whether we are successful or not. We pay the claim within 6 months at top. And I conclude by saying that credit insurance is the unique product in the insurance industry where the insured person knows beforehand when he's from Atradius. This is most important for the capital, work capital, and so forth. Thank you. I believe that the field of credit insurance is most important for exports. It protects exporters. Now let me turn to Mr. Retsas. And let us speak about bilateral trade, USA and Greece. What are the factors that have positively affected this increase of bilateral trade? And what do you believe that can be better done so as to further boost those exports? And there is also Enterprise Greece for that. Yes, indeed. As you know, Greek exports rose over the last years. In 2021, there was an increase of more than 20% in comparison to 20. Nevertheless, there has been an over yield where there was an increase of 41% of American exports and exceeded 1.6 billion euros. So let me give you the figures first so as to have an accurate picture. At the same time, our imports from the USA the previous years were lower than our exports because the USA have been a country with which we used to have a surplus until 2021. It was 1.4 billion euros in 2021. So how do we view the latest trends in 2022? Up till now, until October, we've seen exports increasing by 30%. That is thus plus 41% of 21, pursues with plus 30% in 22. Imports, however, rapidly rose, especially due to the fossil fuel. Now we import fossil fuel at high prices, so we will have a deficit in our commercial trade with the USA. But I reiterate, our exports were plus 41, so it is an ascending, a growing rate. Now, where is that attributed to? Part of this increase of Greek products penetration in the USA is also due to the change of the currency, of the parity. This increase is not an increase in volume, it's an increase in money. Part of it, therefore, it's to be attributed to the increase of volume, but a large part is attributed to inflation and to the costlier American dollar. So a part of the increase of our exports is to be attributed to the more costly currency. Isn't it more difficult to export when the currency is more costly? Yes, we would have expected so, but it didn't operate like that. We see an increase both in volumes and in money of our exports. Other factors which were external the previous years may have helped. For instance, COVID helped all Greek exports because the Greek export machine did not stop. Industry and agricultural production pursued and without serious problems in logistics. Contrary, our main competitors, such as Italy or Spain, had a lot of problems and practically shut down. So during COVID, the exports, including those towards USA, were increased thanks to the capacity of Greeks to adapt more easily to times of disruption. Perhaps Brexit has also affected positively our exports to the USA. This is difficult to assess. Some sectors may have benefited, some others no. Russia, the issue with Russia has greatly and positively affected our relations and our exports to the USA. But just giving in a nutshell conclusion, when you speak of exports towards a country, it's not something that stands alone. It has to be integrated in a broader nexus of relations. It is well known that our relations with the USA are better than ever, and this is valid in all dimensions, in the defense sector, in the diplomatic sector, in the cultural sector. So within this framework, all the factors combining this framework are beneficial to exports. For instance, we had a huge increase of tourism wave the last 2 years. This also leads to an increase of exports. The tourists get to know Greek products and seek for it back in their country. On the defense sector, there are discussions for strategic alliances. I don't know whether I use the right terms as a speaker. In the broader framework of those discussions, there is obviously the promotion of the bilateral trade. And finally, let me mention the other great pillar, foreign investments. In the previous years, our exports, the investments, foreign direct investments from the USA were 30, 40, 80 million euros, not higher. In 2021, they rose, they flew off to almost $500 million. That is investment funds that were cashed in, and the investment brought in far, as a leverage, far more money. So investment and exports is related. When one has foreign investments from the country, direct investments, immediately exports follow suit. So this is the framework. There's not a single word reply. As enterprise Greece, I believe that we can boast of a small share of this success. We had a very intensive action plan in the USA the last year after COVID. During the COVID as well, in the digital platforms, we approached this market. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also was extremely active. So putting two and two together, all that can explain the increase of exports towards the USA.
So what justifies the increase of exports of Greece into the United States, and what are the next goals to come and that can be further developed? Now, as we've seen from studies that have been carried out and here in the American-Hellenic American Chamber of Commerce, is that the main sectors and branches that were the drivers for all these years were a single company selling a specific product, which is razor blades, which drives to a great extent this exports, aluminium, pharmaceuticals, are sectors and branches that have a huge growth. What we highlighted last year, and it's very important to repeat at this time, is that 10 years ago, if you remember, Mr. Spirtounias, we were discussing back in the day, and we as the AmCham were setting the foundation and saying that exports are around 2 to 3%. How could we make it 5 or 7%? And generally speaking, that was sort of a pipe dream. But I think that we are at 5% now. A key sector that still hasn't been measured yet because for lack of infrastructure, and something that we've raised with the Ministry of the Exterior now, is that we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're stealing from our own pockets. Is the creative cultural industries. Greece has tremendous potential and capacity, and there are a host of people that provide such services primarily to American companies. And as a matter of fact, if you remember last time through some webinars organized by the AmCham, we also had from the fashion sector and overall architects and other specialties expressing their interest. We have very close links between services provided in our country and services requested or offered from the other side of the Atlantic, and vice versa. So a very important element is that, in my opinion, a lot of effort should be made in that direction because it's a key trend for us. And the reason is not for us to sell to the United States or for the US to sell to us, because we could work as a hub to lead many projects that are in the pipeline either towards the Middle East or the rest of Europe. And there is always a joint participation of these countries. So I would agree by saying that the traditional sectors are in fact those that, as we speak, are the ones that rank first. But there is a tremendous growth at a very fast pace. I believe that we need to brace ourselves, to prepare ourselves, and to be ready to welcome tomorrow and usher it in. In terms of increase, I will agree. I think it's something we've showcased and highlighted time and again, that in terms of volume, we're still lagging behind. We're stragglers. the values have increased, and due to the inflation tendencies, they will continue to rise. So necessarily, the numbers regarding value do not always speak the truth in trade. And I think that you will confirm what I say, but it's volume that always speaks the truth. So I think it's volumes we should be focusing on. And of course, oil products and oil derivatives, that is something that we have included as a necessity. But we shouldn't forget that we do imports as easy as we do with exports, because we don't have all this volume as our own consumption. So it is a way of re-exporting what we import. So we shouldn't be afraid to use it, because countries such as the Netherlands are based par excellence in the re-export of products, which we can see in their own bulletins. So this is a very important part, to link this with the previous panels, that indeed the energy sector is something that is very important, and we can enter it in our ledgers and chalk it up as prosperity. Right, thank you very much. I would like to return to Mr. Tzeis. Now, liquidity and financing is increasing. The prices of financing increases with the exchange currency differences, with inflation. How can this credit insurance mechanism help now that money is becoming more expensive? Well, unfortunately, expensive money is a timely reality. And one can fairly and squarely change the question and say, okay, Mr. Tzeis, it's fine with this credit insurance. The company facilitates us to sell people with credit, not on a cash basis, and we're safe. And at the worst case scenario, we'll get our money 6 months after the agreed upon payment date. And one would ask, do you know whether we have the money to sustain ourselves, to receive the money from the client at the due date, or even worse, we can wait from the reimbursement from Atradius 6 months after the due date? How can we meet our requirements, our claims, our pay, our obligations, salaries, power? So we need working capital, which we do not have. The answer to this comes from the credit insurance mechanism itself. As we said before, this insurance is given through credit caps, credit limits. We give those credits to the exporter, to the debtors. This is the insurance we provide them. This is the collateral we provide them with. It's the guarantee. And we're talking about A-rated collateral. Why A-rated? Well, because Atradius is a group that is Moody's A-rated themselves, so the receivables of our exporter have been insured by an A-rated collateral. This means that the exporter may cede these receivables to banking institutions, banks, factors, funds, or combinations of such banking institutions, in order for these institutions to give them cheaper and easier financing. Why cheaper and why easier? Well, because these financial institutions do not run any risk of damage, because they have our own A-rated collateral. So if the end buyer does not pay, they will get their money from us. So they give this coveted, cheap and easier money at a competitive rate. In conclusion, I would like to say that 1 in 4 people who use such export insurance do not do that because they might suffer some precariousness or some exposure. They do so because they have no access to cheap and easy money. So this is a very important edge, a very important advantage for our exporters. Right, thank you. If you can very, very fast tell me, I want this very fast because I want to ask other questions. What is the increase at a percentage of your turnover of the past 3 years? In the sense of people who wish this export insurance. Now, we see an increasing demand. So you mean that exporters are informed of this? Yes, of course. Well, with your assistance, we see more ardor and more willingness for them to enter this mechanism. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Retsas, if I may ask you something. I think you said earlier that there are a lot of participations in international expos, etc. Now the question is, what has changed in the Greek exporters' presentation? And we're talking about the United States, but elsewhere as well, because, well, many a time in the past there was the impression that, well, we go there, we don't know how to speak, we don't know how to present ourselves, we don't know how to make appointments, and we're just standing there waiting for people to come. Is there a change in the mentality of Greek exporters? Are they well prepared? Do you follow them up? Do you look at them to see what you subsidize actually have a return on investment, as it were? Well, for the past dozen of years, the Greek export community suffered two crises that were very important. And they emerged from these crises much enhanced. The first of all was the financial crisis. It was a credibility crisis for Greek products and Greek companies. There, of course, there was a triage of and a separation of the best and the worst companies. But as a whole, all in all, Greek companies came out stronger. They realized the importance of export, and they realized the importance of exports to powerful countries, to which a systematic effort is required, systematic investments, and you have long-term returns, as is the case with the United States. So the financial crisis changed somewhat the way that they were working in the past, which was short-sighted and more spontaneous, and I'm talking about export companies. Then COVID struck. As I said before, we appeared quite flexible and adaptable as Greeks, and we were very adaptable in terms of digital skill acquisition. We consider that we are Mediterranean people and that we can strike a deal over a bottle of wine, exchanging a handshake and looking the other person in the eye. Greek exporters managed to make similar cases, similar deals through Zoom or through Microsoft Teams, and we as Enterprise Greece organized webinars on such digital skills. And the AmCham, I think, also had similar webinars offered as well. And we saw there that the Greek exporters adapted themselves, and they have created skills that will help them in the future as well. So yes, in fact, they have changed. And please allow me to say that in the seminars we organize, everything that has to do with the United States, they're the ones that are the most coveted, the most wanted ones. We have the E-Exports Academy in Enterprise Greece. Everything that has to do with the United States is what the people is the most sought after. Right. Well, Dimitris, I need to spend less time for you because we're out of time. I would like to thank everyone for this session, and let's move without further ado to the next session. Thank you one and all for joining us.